Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a group of fascinating and terrifying encounters to share with you. Before we get into those encounters, a couple links I'd like to share as well. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under this video. Now, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. My sighting of this elusive creature was September 9th, 2011. It all started out on a night of September 5th at around 2 in the morning. It was one of those sleepless nights. I got up and walked out to my back porch to smoke because I don't smoke in the house. The moon was full that night and partially lit up my backyard. I was standing on my porch, and to the left is a line of pines that divide my property from the cornfield beside the house. I heard this deep guttural growl coming from the field area just behind those pines, and this happened 3 times within a few minutes. So after trying to see what had made the growling, I couldn't see anything because it was so dark. I ended up going back into the house. The next night I ended up going back onto the porch and smoking again, and it was about 1 in the morning. And after being out there for a few minutes, I heard this deep guttural growl again. But yet, I couldn't see what made it. Started to get curious about the whole situation, and Friday, September 9th at approximately 6 p.m., my son, who was 24 years old, stopped over. I was telling him about what had happened, so we decided to take a walk into the woods just to see what we could find. We walked across the cornfield and through the tree line and entered a tall grassy field where you could tell deer had lied there that night. While standing there, we were looking slightly to the right at a crabapple tree that was 200 feet from us. Out of the corner of my left eye, I noticed movement from the other side of the creek that runs parallel north to south at the edge of the field. I asked my son if he had seen it, and he responded with a no. We decided to walk over and check it out, and at this point, I couldn't tell you what it was, nor could I tell you the color. All I do know is that something moved from an area deeper into the woods. We proceeded across the field and came to a narrow creek about 3 feet wide, and we crossed over and followed the edge of the narrow creek on a small deer path. I was checking the creek bed and edge for any kind of prints from what had moved from that area, but came up empty-handed. My son told me to come to where he was standing. He told me to follow the creek's edge and look over to a very large tree at the creek edge because he thought he had saw something squatting down beside the tree. But again, I couldn't make out anything at this point. I proceeded with checking for prints at the edge of the creek for about another 10 minutes or so. Then I went back to the same area that we were standing to look over at the large tree that my son thought something was there. And yeah, the area looked slightly different, but we couldn't. What was there? We started heading east deeper into the wooded area. I went southeast and my son headed northeast, and he came to an area that was a medium, tall, green grassed area that was surrounded by brush, and yelled that he had smelled something awful in the area. So I proceeded over, and the smell in that area was really bad. But we looked around that area, but we still couldn't find anything. We'd been gone for about 45 minutes now, and after coming up with no prints, etc., we decided to walk back to the house. Son and I headed back to the creek and followed the edge until we almost got back to where we had crossed over earlier. My son was about 6 feet in front of me. He stopped and was looking to his left. I asked him what he was doing, and he replied, "Look over there." In my line of view, I couldn't see too much because of the limbs and leaves, and I asked again what he was looking at, and he pointed and said, "Right there." I hunched down to be able to see because of the limb, and at about 100 and 125 feet from us stood this massive creature besides a large tree. We both froze, and all I remember is looking at this very large creature, dark brown in color and about 7 to 8 feet tall, extremely massive. The creature was moving its upper body left to right, which I am thinking that he was trying to see our position, or if he could see us, because I knew that he knew we were still there. The creature had a complaint gait. His arms were long enough that his fingers was about to his knees. This creature had to weigh at least 600 pounds. The beast was extremely muscular and had a lot of hair on its face. I could not see the ears or the palms of the creatures. We stood there for maybe about a minute, but it seemed more like 30 minutes, and we moved before the giant did. We started walking across the grassy field and up through the cornfield, always looking behind us to see if we were being followed. And once we returned back home and stepped into the yard, there was 2 loud tree knocks that came from our left, and we both looked at each other because we both heard it. That is the end of my sighting, and from that day until January 31st, 2012, I have had whistles, I have had prints, I have seen eye shine from the tree line, and I have heard a type of chatter, and also one strange one that sounded like someone hitting the bottom of a metal pan with a spoon. Today's second encounter is one of my favorite encounters from a while back, probably around when I started this channel. One night I had a brief encounter. It was unusually slow. During the slow parts of my night, I park outside of the facility I work out of and watch the wildlife. It's abundant with a mixture of fox, coyotes, raccoon, and every once in a while I'll spy a red wolf, breaking the wood line, trotting across an open field in search of small game. Our facility is located on a dead-end street, which backs up to a major creek, and to the left, we have a smaller creek that breaks off of the larger one. Both creeks are fed by a large river about a mile away. I should also mention that we have large patches of woodland that lead to our facility, and that the area does not have a lot of light until you turn into the parking area. About a week prior to my encounter, I would sit at the end of the road to complete my paperwork and wait for the next call. As I'm parked there, I would get the sense of being watched. I would look up, almost expecting to see someone standing in front of my truck. Let me say that the darkness or the woods do not spook me or make me jumpy. I was raised in a swamp, close to a river, and rather enjoy the solitude. Not only did I have a sense of being watched and sharing my space with someone or something, I noted that there were no normal night sounds such as crickets and frogs. I also found it baffling that all the wildlife seemed to be gone from the area, and this really bothered me. I couldn't figure it out. On the night that I had my encounter, I decided to leave some wet dog food at the edge of the wood line, hoping to entice a family of raccoon out, so that I could at least make sure that they were okay. This family of raccoon I have watched grow up from kits, and not seeing them bothered me. Also, I didn't see a gray fox that would hang around the area. This fox would come within 4 to 5 feet from you, but would be guarded the while. He would hang out with certain people, then retreat back into the woods. Anyway, I popped the top off some smelly dog food, and as I was pulling the top of the can off, I heard a deep growl come from the edge of the wood line. I had never heard an animal growl with such force and so deeply. At first I thought it may have been a jake brake from the interstate that could be heard from our facility, but that's not what it was. I could hear it from the woodline, hitting my face, and felt the growl inside of my chest, pretty much like a vibration. I knew this was not a bear. The same as someone knows their left hand from their right, you just know. And yeah, we do have bear around here, but I can tell you quite bluntly and very firmly that this was not a bear or any other wildlife that was normal to the area. I dropped my head down and refused to look back up. I dumped the can of food on the ground with one hand, thumping, hoping whatever was in the woodline would rather have the can of food instead of me. I backed away with my head down until I reached my truck. My instinct told me to drive away, and so I did. About a half an hour later, I returned due to my curiosity overruling my common sense. Being a natural skeptic, I was prepared to figure out what the early event was. I parked in the same place and, this time, had walked to the back of my truck to have a smoke. While standing there, I observed a dark mass come across the road and disappear into the open field. That was mostly overgrown with wild blackberry brush and grass. I have a trained eye, I take in a lot of detail, and still, I admit to suffering from short-term memory loss due to TBI that ended my law enforcement career. What I saw at that moment, though, will be forever etched in my memory. I can only describe this creature as what I took at the time to be some kind of hybrid. Although it was on all fours to me, it did not appear natural. It moved very quickly in fluent motions. Looking back, I was most surprised by the creature having the intelligence to appear to be natural. Something was off with its gait, though. It was kind of like the front legs were pulling its body forward. The back was hunched at the shoulders, and it had a long back. The creature was black, which I can only describe as a dark mass with no reflection. I also noted it had a small animal in its mouth. The strangest part was that I could see the definition of most of the small animal compared to the darkness of the creature that I now believe to be a dogman. The snout was long but fit its body. What struck me the most was its ears. They were folded back like you may see on a Dutch Shepherd or German Shepherd. I guess with my background working with dogs, the ears were clearly defined to me. I can't say what kind of tail it had or what color its eyes were. I just know it was there 1 minute and gone the next. When daylight came, I looked for tracks, listened to my gut, and did not enter the field looking for it. The ground leading out to the smaller creek was covered in grass, and what dirt was there was hard. I was left baffled, but more amazed than anything. I sat on my experience for several months. I didn't want to tell anyone. I then started searching the internet for what I had seen. I guess in my mind I wondered if it was some type of hybrid created by man that had escaped. I found several sites on the internet, but none seemed to be close to what I had seen. Nothing until I came across the picture of a dogman. If you take what I saw and stand it upright, instead of being on all fours, that's what I saw with no doubt. I'm definitely sure it was a dogman. It was a young adult, but it was not overly massive. What I ponder the most is the fact the dogman had to catch my scent before clearing the woodline. I know scent and how it works. The dogman knew I was there before coming out of the woods. I suppose that will be an answer I never have. After a few months of keeping my experience to myself, I spoke with a few coworkers. Of course, they told me it was a bear or a large wolf, but they did acknowledge that the wildlife had disappeared for a while. I was told to share my story, but I think it was only so my coworker could get a good laugh at me behind my back. I stand by what I saw, although I don't speak about it much because of people like him. I have never been fascinated by Bigfoot or other similar creatures, although I did respond to a Bigfoot call off the record for a law enforcement friend. But at this point, I am consumed with what I saw that morning and learning more about it. As I write this, I am once again on night shift, parked at that same spot where I had my encounter. I'm pretty sure that the Dogman has now left the area. The wildlife is back and the night sounds are all around. I guess I will always wonder if it will come back again, but I can't say I will ever walk the woods at night again, looking for animal tracks by myself. Today's third encounter comes to us from Adair County, Kentucky. Sad to say that now the area is underwater, but I will try to recall as best as I can. I was awakened one late summer evening at 2 a.m. The night was hot and humid. A very isolated rural area back in 1963. I was 10 at the time. We had no air conditioning and we slept with the windows open with screens covering them. I guess what woke me was the smell. Very bad stench, overpowering. When I looked at the window, I saw something that filled the entire field of vision through the window. It was swaying back and forth, making a low, grunting, guttural type growl. As it swayed, I could see hair hanging from its arms. The only light that night was a small security type light on a pole about 40 yards from the house. It was somewhat backlit, and I could tell that it was taller than my window. As it swayed back and forth, it also seemed to back up and come forward also. From that, I could tell that it had hair on its arms. I couldn't see its face, just its head shape, no neck, just a massive creature that I'd estimate to be at least 7 feet. It still gives me goosebumps to the day thinking about it. I was very afraid, and I jumped out of bed and went and told my parents. They looked around and didn't see anything. Told me I was probably dreaming. I still remember them commenting on the smell, and also my dog, a German Shepherd who stayed in the barn, was really acting crazy, barking, whining, acting aggressive. We discovered the next morning that there were several chickens missing. Also remembered that there were a couple of nights about a week before the incident that we heard some strange howling and hoots down by the river's bottom. I've since realized that they were very similar to what I've heard on TV that have been attributed to Bigfoot. I've only told my wife, my parents, and something interesting is that my mom told me in later years that she believed me and said that she had seen what she calls a person in a gorilla suit in a field close to the river. I don't think it was anyone in a costume because everyone that I knew had guns and hunted, and anyone foolish enough to do that would have put their lives in jeopardy. A few days after clearing the space for the polytunnel, we had a bonfire to get rid of all the brush. It was damp, so the fire made a lot of smoke until it eventually got going and burnt itself down. It was getting dark and I needed to put some tea on, so I left my partner to keep an eye on the fire and went off. 20 minutes later, he came running to the house saying something was sliding down the bank towards him, but he couldn't see a thing. He could hear it and could tell it was getting closer. He was very genuinely shaken, as he couldn't see anything. The next thing that happened was when I was with the Hazel Capice, just chilling, watching some squirrels. All of a sudden there was this big whoosh next to me that came from behind. It was as if something big had flown past my head, and I could feel the wind on my face as it passed. I had really expected to see a buzzard fly down or perch in. A few days after clearing the space for the polytunnel, we had a bonfire to get rid of the brush. It was damp, so the fire made a lot of smoke until it eventually got going and burnt itself down. It was getting dark and I needed to put some tea on, so I left my partner to keep an eye on the fire and went off. A good 20 minutes later, he came running into the house saying something was sliding down the bank toward him. But he couldn't see a thing. He could hear it and could tell that it was getting closer. He was very scared as he couldn't see anything. The next thing that happened was when I was in the hazel coppice just chilling, watching some squirrels. All of a sudden there was a big whoosh next to me that came from behind. It was as if something big had flown past my head, and I could feel the wind on my face as it passed. I had really expected to see a buzzard fly down off its perch in one of the trees, but there was nothing to be seen. That really was impossible because of where it would have had to fly to exit the woods. I would have seen it. It wasn't long after this that I finally saw the creature. I was walking my dog in the late afternoon at the beginning of October 2019. I had decided to go down to the River Dee, which has a small wooden bridge across. It is on the ancient pathway near an old church not far from the cottage. I got to where there is a big oak tree on the bank that looks down into the ravine, which the river flows through, and where the bridge is. That trail then leads off to another pathway which takes you to an old farm. As I looked down toward the bridge, I could see something big and black moving down the path, running toward the bridge from the direction of the old farm. I actually thought about the cows that roam free here, and you know how they can be when dogs are around. But as it got nearer and became clear to me that what I was looking at was jet black and resembled a giant wolf. But it was walking upright on its hind legs. It had big, broad shoulders in its arms and a thin waist compared to the rest of its body. I can't say that it had canine legs or front-facing knees, but it was definitely upright, just like a human would be. It stopped at the end of the path and just stood looking toward the bridge. Its chest was heaving like it was out of breath, just waiting there until it got its breath back. For a few seconds, I just stared in disbelief, and then all of a sudden it was gone. A few weeks later, I cleared a path near the fallen spruce that leads to the gate at the end of our woods. It wasn't too much work, and after clearing brambles, bending and snapping a few branches out of the way, it was done. The next day, I went out to use the path I had cleared, and at the entrance to it, there was a hazel branch that had been bent over and was being held down by a broken log, literally blocking the path I had just made. I went and got my partner and asked him what he thought because of it. There was no way that could have happened on its own. He had to agree. I have not moved the log or used the path because I feel something doesn't want me going in that part of the woods for sure. Last summer, before I saw the creature down near the bridge, I decided to get a dog for a local rescue. I took him up in the woods to explore and have a bit of fun playing with the sticks. I didn't really know why, but he kept running off as if to chase something and thought it was the squirrels. When I caught up with him, he would just be standing barking, not at a tree, but at thin air. I thought this was very odd, and day by day it got worse. As he could see, just stand near the house, barking at the fence and the gate that led to the woods. Sadly, he never settled, and we had to find him a quieter home. We do have a new dog, and she is also experiencing things on the land. at the house as well. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I am very sick today. I am so under the weather. While recording this, just completely fell asleep during the recording of it. My daughter is sick as well, so it's just been a really nasty last couple of hours into today that we just both really feel like crap. Otherwise, I had intended on this being longer, but I think it's just time to crash and hopefully try to feel better for tomorrow. With that, I want to thank everybody for all your support, and please be kind to each other, and may the Great Spirit watch over all of us and guide us on our path of life.